The Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting happened on May 3rd, 2025, and we both tuned into the meeting and we'll share our experiences and what we learned. You're listening to the Investing Mastermind Podcast. I'm Michelle Marki.
I'm Signe Lønholdt.
And Sina, you actually went to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. What was that like?
Yeah, I went to Omaha, and the reason I went was because I already had a hotel booking, but I could actually cancel it. But the reason I went was because when I saw the agenda for the day for the QA session, I noticed that it was significantly shorter than normal. And I was like, okay, maybe this could be the last annual meeting or one of the last ones. I better go because I'll regret if I don't go, and it might be the last meeting where Warren Buffett, of course, it's not going to be the last annual meeting, but the last annual meeting where he is actually going to be present. So I decided sort of last minute, a month in advance, to keep my hotel room and book tickets and go over there. So yes, I was there for the big news.
Yeah, we learned that Warren Buffett intends to step down at the end of this year and let his successor, Greg Abel, take the reins as the future CEO of Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like 3 minutes before the meeting ended, Warren Buffett said, I have some news I wanted to share with you. It's news I've only shared with my two children that are on the board of the Berkshire Hathaway board. So he has three children, but only two of them are on the board. And when he said that, I just picked up my phone to record what he was going to say because I knew it was going to be big. And it was, because that's when he announced that he intended to suggest him stepping down as the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And Greg Abel, we've known that for years, that it would be Greg that would take over the reins of Berkshire Hathaway. But from 2026, that Greg would be CEO. And the board meeting was the next day. And what he said was no one on the board except his two children, Susie and Howard, knew about this decision. And I don't think even Greg knew about it because Greg was sitting right next to Warren Buffett. And when Warren Buffett said the news, Greg turned his head. And for several minutes, Greg did not move an inch. He was just looking to the side towards Warren Buffett. And I think there was 1,000 thoughts going through his head. Maybe he knew, but from his body language, I would assume he didn't know at that time. So that was because for several minutes, he was just looking at Warren Buffett, not moving an inch. His head was moved in the complete same direction, no movement. So I think he was in a bit of a shock. He knew it was coming, but I'm sure he would have maybe preferred to get like a tiny heads up.
Yeah, like just to be on stage and have that news dropped on you. And maybe he was thinking Buffett would be there until the rest of his life, just like the Pope. And,
yeah, and the Queen here, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe he was taken aback because he never thought it would come so soon. Like, who knows? Buffett could still live to 115. You never know. I mean, he's trying to compete with the women who have the age record, right? I think he was saying
yeah, he mentioned that
women have the oldest age record. So maybe he could have lived another 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. And it also goes to show how important it is for Warren Buffett to signal that the shareholders of a company is truly the owners of a company. And it is something that we as investors can learn from. We want to invest in companies where the leadership team thinks of us as shareholders as being truly the owners of the business. And he truly, when you have a room full of shareholders, it's pretty evident that he truly sees the shareholders as his most important stakeholders, even more important than the board being our representatives, the shareholders' representatives in Berkshire Hathaway. So like that goes to show, don't you think so? Like that signals something.
Yeah, absolutely. That he wanted to share it collectively with everyone instead of giving people privileged information.
Yeah, and it would have made probably some headlines, and he maybe wanted some other headlines to be more dominant. If it had leaked, if he would have told anybody, it would have leaked. And he also did mention that So if you're tuning in on video, I know we usually also do video on multiple platforms. You can see me with a big money. What do you call this? What do you call it in English? We call it boa in Danish, money boa. And we're just
Well,
going to take it off, and it's going to be noisy. So just give me a
it
second.
it's sort of like a almost like a lei made of dollars. So if you think of the Hawaiian leis that people can wear when they go to Hawaii and it's like the tropical flowers, this is almost like that, but giant $100 bills.
Yeah, exactly. I bought it at the Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting, and I thought it was just the funniest gimmick. Last year, I had my photo taken at the Oriental Trading's booth with the money thing on, and this year you could actually buy them. So I was like, I'm gonna get one of those, and my kids love it. So it's just such a fun little
That's
gimmicky thing. And if you didn't tune in on video, it's exactly what you just described, Michelle.
Yeah, so watch it on our YouTube channel. You can see Cena wear the money lei. So it's kind of funny. Nice one. I'm glad you got that. It's very entertaining. Maybe you guys can wear it for Halloween or something. So,
Yeah, exactly. Or, every time I have a call with my clients these days, I put it on and we have a good laugh about it because it's just, yeah, it's a funny little gimmick thing.
mhm.
So, but yeah, it was one of the things, at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting in connection to the Q&A session where Warren Buffett, amongst other things, also talked about that he was leaving or he's continuing, right, as a chairman of the board, but giving the reins as CEO to Greg Abel. But in connection to the meeting, there's also a ton of different kinds of vendors that are owned or partly owned by Berkshire Hathaway. So there's a, opportunity to also buy things. And I also bought actually a book there. It was Berkshire Hathaway's 60th anniversary. So I bought the 60th anniversary book there was a 50th anniversary book and it's sort of just updated version of that book, but it sold out. So I was quick to go get it during one of the small breaks because I know that oftentimes when they have certain limited edition books, then they're going to sell out. So
Wow. So you
some
got the
things,
one of the few, like I think Buffett said there's only 2,500 copies of that.
yeah, I'm not sure that what I really would have liked was one of the copies where he had his own signature in there, but that was, I
That
think it was
one,
going for 20,000
yeah,
euros, the
that one was
cheapest
really
one.
expensive. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
think
a
there was like 4 or 6 copies of those, but yeah,
yeah, that's another level of commitment.
yeah, exactly. And maybe also, like a little too much, but that would have been fun.
Hmm.
But yeah, besides, the big news of the day, which, definitely took over the whole also media landscape. But the interesting thing is you see all these finance people with, most people coming to the Berkshire Hathaway aren't necessarily like the typical finance bros, but some of them are, and seeing and hearing in the hallways some of them talk, about this kind of it is sad that he's leaving, right? So a lot of people were impacted. And I also like it was even though it wasn't a big surprise per se, it was still shocking. And it was still, a moment of heaviness. And in the hallways, you saw all these people that you usually wouldn't necessarily think that, they would be talking, manly men, talking about some of the emotions that came up. I actually thought that was also kind of beautiful. To experience. People were definitely impacted by the news. And when it happened, being with 40,000 people in that room, it was quiet. The Berkshire Hathaway meeting, it is sort of quiet. When Warren Buffett talked, there's not a whole lot of noise, but it got super quiet. It was, quiet. And then, of course, he said that he was not going to sell one single share. And then everybody applauded that. And there was a standing ovation. And he said, well, I don't know, are you clapping because you're happy about this news? Or I don't know how to interpret that. But of course, we clapped because, owed to Warren Buffett. So there were so many people there also this year. The lines were around the CHI Health Center, which is the venue. I've never seen that many people there. I think a lot of people kind of wanted to go this year because of the change in the agenda.
Yeah, maybe, they're recognizing he's getting up there in age and you never know when he'll go. So better to try to see him at least one last time if it is the last time. So, but hopefully it's not the last time. Hopefully he'll be back for future meetings. But that's also questionable, right? Like, what will future meetings be like, and will they draw similar crowds? Like, I think if they had a future annual meeting without Buffett, it would be not as much of a draw. Like, if he doesn't show up, there won't be nearly as many people, in my opinion, coming.
I agree on that. And that was also talk of town after the meeting, right? So what's interesting is what is going on after the meeting. What's people on their minds? And some of the things was, okay, will there still be a crowd going to Omaha? Some people thought that because of the community that this has created, that there would still be something going on in Omaha, while other people were like, well, we wouldn't come if Warren Buffett wasn't there. Maybe I should have asked before we recorded this podcast. I could have asked Guy Spear and asked, are you going to continue? Maybe he doesn't even know if he's going to continue to host Value X at Berkshire, which is an event prior to the Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting that also brings a lot of people into the room to listen to, all the speakers he had at Value X or has at Value X. So maybe I should have asked before the podcast, but I don't even know if he knows yet if they're going to continue, because it really also does depend on, like you say, he is still the chairman of the board, so potentially he could still come in, play some sort of role in terms of, maybe being there, answering a few questions. We don't know how it's going to be. Of course, he needs to pass it on to Greg. He can't play first person anymore. It needs to be Greg. So he needs to step aside, but maybe they would still sort of bring him in for a small QA or something like that. We honestly don't know. And one thing I thought about was also in terms of just Omaha as a city, because every year, thousands, 10,000s of people are coming into this small town. The hotels and the Airbnbs during that time are incredibly busy. So how is it going to be with the local businesses? And that's also something that was discussed amongst other things, of course. But the big topic, of course, after the event was definitely talking about that he's no longer being there and speculating about what's the future going to be like, and not as much some of the other content that was actually discussed. But maybe we can start, segueing into that, Michelle. Or do you have anything to say about the big news, him leaving?
We can touch on more of that, like the impact on some of the other events. Like, I know you attended other events, and maybe we'll save that for another podcast. But getting into the meat of what the meeting was about, I think, as usual, you have your usual flavor of some international people and domestic people asking their wily questions, and you have teenagers saying, how can I be successful? So, you have your usual questions. I feel like every year it's a pattern of, people trying their best to get answers out of Buffett in a way that could enlighten them or us. Like, I remember that one Polish lady, she was like, Buffett, you turned me away before. I'm here now. Can you meet with me for an hour? And he's like, no. And then the other,
And we're 45,000 other people waiting for the answer to that question, because we would all be asking him about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like an American guy being like, "Why did you buy Portillo's hot dogs?" And then apparently there was some other private equity firm with the Berkshire name that got it. So it was just like confusion, and like
Yeah,
that
and
was
the guy
interesting.
sitting next to me, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the guy sitting next to me immediately, he was like, that doesn't ring a bell. And so he looked it up, and within seconds he found out it's not Berkshire Hathaway, it's Berkshire Partners. And one thing I was wondering was, the person who asked the question, is he somehow affiliated with any of the businesses, like either Berkshire Partners or Pocacillo? Or so I actually thought that was a little bit odd. But it's so great to actually hear, Michelle, you say some of these things, because that's exactly also was talk of town. There was, some of those questions this time were honestly really without context. I mean, I wish they would vet some of the questions there and make sure that this time there was like 4 people that asked the exact same question, right? So instead of saying, okay, my question was already answered, let's try to find someone that could ask another
Yeah, maybe it was a little bit of a time waster to hear kind of repetitive stuff or ones that were kind of not that useful of a question, although I think Buffett made the most of it and he was stumped for a second and we learned like that they don't even know about all the businesses they own. So it's just kind of funny that we learned something like, oh yeah, one of
Yeah.
our subsidiaries, Marmon, owns like hundreds of businesses or at least 100 and who knows what we own. Like so it's kind of hilarious that they're like shrugging.
I don't know whether to be concerned about that or think that was funny. I was still like, okay, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that they don't even know about this. I still don't know exactly how I feel about that, but it is a little bit concerning that they didn't immediately say, huh? But the
Yeah,
guy
I
next to
mean,
me, he was like immediately like, I don't think so, and looking it up. So
and there was a question about, another teenager being like, "Oh, don't you want to be energy responsible for my future?" And why are you having coal? And then Greg gave a long-winded answer about why they made the decision. Like, I understand where Greg's coming from of like back then, you're not just going to drop all your fossil fuel projects and immediately go to renewable energy. But like it sounded like he was on the defensive. Like he seemed a little bit uncomfortable in answering that question.
yeah, and we've had that before, and rumor has it, I heard from someone, so it is a rumor that there was a group of, this activist group that stormed in, threw all their names in the, pile of names to actually get a question on stage, and they were a bigger group. So the, chance of or possibility of one of them actually being picked was very big. So we've had that question in the past, and it was like an activist group that asked that question. And now I honestly I don't know much about the energy sector, but from what we've heard in the past is that Berkshire Hathaway Energy, they're actually more green than a lot of other energy companies that are trying to do much more to make that change. So that was also one of the questions which was planted there to kind of be an activist question. And
Mm.
maybe, it's a good question, especially if you're from around the area, but on a bigger scale. And I think he answered it fine. He's answered it before, so yeah.
I wonder what's going through his mind when he's answering it because he's taking a lot of care to explain why decisions were made like 20 years ago, but maybe the answer could have been a little bit better by talking about in the future a little bit more of, how we're continuing to improve and we're going to make it better for, our descendants and so on. Like, maybe people were looking for more of an inspiring answer like yeah, it was like that back then. Like, I think he dwelled a little bit too much on the past and should focus a little bit more on the future because, we understand generally why, obviously fossil fuels are still cheaper and more reliable than renewable energy by and large, like with that outage in Spain when there were like the sun went out, right? Like, clearly there are still some drawbacks with renewable energy sources, but maybe he could have been a little bit more inspiring with a future answer of like, we recognize it was like this, but we want to make it better for you and other young people in the future.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And he did, say a little bit of that, but wasn't very direct, the answer. It was kind of more a political answer, in my opinion. And another thing is also, reflecting on that answer and him speaking at that time where you have the QA session with Warren Buffett and he's so lively and he's using humor or, saying something. So Warren Buffett is kind of easy to listen to, whereas Greg Abel is a little bit more difficult to continue to listen to because his voice is more monotone and he's so serious, right? So, in the future, how will it be to go to the Berkshire annual meeting? Potentially, Greg is going to be there. Ajit Jain, is Ted and Todd, are they going to be there? The investment managers, that's going to be interesting. Who is actually going to be present? Are they going to do a QA session? Now, I don't know if you had more to say about that because now I started talking about something else,
Yeah.
but could have been a better answer. I agree.
Yeah. And maybe we should get into a little bit more of the Q&A that was discussed and the what ifs and the how it was like to your point. I think we've got a lot for people to chew on in today's episode, and I'm excited to continue this discussion in our next episode.
Yeah, me too. And in the next episode, we still actually have some very interesting things that he actually did say at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, because in recent years, Warren Buffett hasn't said much because, whatever he says can always be misinterpreted. And he's always careful to say anything. But this meeting, he actually did say a few things. So we hope you'll be back and listen to the podcast when we come out on Tuesday in 2 weeks from now.
Till next time.
If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you automatically get new episodes in your feed.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.